objectives for today is to identify ways the Pueblo adapted to the desert and determine how the Navajo learned to live in their new environment. So I want you to turn to page 32. Okay, so now thinking back to our lesson number 1 when we were learning about the first Pueblo Indians, we're now going to learn about the people in the Southwest, and the Pueblo Indians in this chapter are actually living in the New Mexico, Arizona, and some parts of Texas area. Rod, what would be one way that the Pueblo are having to adapt to their environment now that they're living in New Mexico and Arizona and Texas?
They're going to have to find a way to stay cooler.
They'll have to find a way to stay cooler. So on page 33, can you imagine farming in a place that only receives a few inches of rain each year? The Pueblo, like their ancestors, figured out how to farm in the desert, and they use a method called dry farming. So here, okay, so as you can see, here's the fields, and they would travel out to their fields on their paths and make sure that they had water. So the dry farming uses tiny dams and canals to direct water to beans, squash, and cotton crops. The Pueblo also learned how to grow a special maize plant. JC, what was maize? What kind of crop was that? Devin, can you help her out?
Corn.
Maize is corn. And this plant had long roots that could reach water deep underground. So the crop actually adapted to the land because it could reach down into the ground to get the water. So the Hope and the Zuni are two Pueblo groups shown on the map below. Let's see, Brianna, can you look on the map and show me or point to where the Hope and Zuni are?
Right here.
Can you identify that location? Something
Denver?
very specific about that. Take a look at the map and see if you can figure it out.
It's at the four corners.
It is at the four corners. So the next thing is we're going to look at the Pueblo homes. So the Pueblo homes were called Pueblos. And what were Pueblos built out of, Maya?
They were built out of
Adobe. And what was adobe made out of? Kara?
mud and straw.
Mud and straw. So the Spanish used the word Pueblo to describe both the people and their homes. Adobe protection homes from extreme heat and cold. And the Pueblos looked like apartment buildings, except for the first room had no what? Can you look at the picture and tell me what it didn't have? Just look at the picture for right now. Look at the very first floor of these buildings. What is so different about them than normal apartments? Okay, I want you to discuss with your partner what's different. Okay, so I'm hearing everybody say that there was no doors. Now I want you to talk with your partner. What would be the significance in this area of not having any doors on the first floor? Talk with your partner. Okay, Isabel, what was one thing your partner said would be a reason why not to have doors on the first floor of an apartment building?
To keep it cool.
Keep it cool. Okay, Tanner, what was another reason?
keep the animals out?
It would keep animals out. It also helped keep other predators out. So what the Indians actually would do is they'd climb up their ladder and they'd get to the floor that they wanted, and then they'd actually pull the ladder up and keep it on the roof. So other enemies couldn't get in, and it was a device to protect them. The Pueblo's significance were their homes and their irrigation. So I want you to talk with your partner now and determine what ways the Pueblo had to adapt when they moved to the desert. Talk with your partner. Okay, Christian, what was one thing that your partner said would be a way that the Pueblo adapted to the desert? What'd your partner say? Jacob, can you help him remember what you said? They might use cactuses. What would they use the cactus for?
Water.
To get water. Yep. Maya, what was something that your partner said? They'd have to build houses. And what was the significance of the way that their houses were built? What did it protect them from? Baylor, can you help?
No doors on the bottom.
Uh-huh. And what did that protect them from?
Animals.
Uh-huh. And what was the other significance of building a house out of adobe? Tristan?
To keep the extreme cold and heat out.
Exactly. Okay, so now let's turn to page 34. Thousands of years ago, the Navajo were hunter-gatherers. And what was a hunter-gatherer? Tanner?
A person who would, a batch of people who would go out and hunt, and they would collect food, and they would travel with the animals so that they would have meat and food when they got back.
Yep. So if the animals were always moving, that means that they'd have to move with the animals. So since we know that the Navajo are hunter-gatherers, we know that they have to move. So talk with your partner how migrating could relate to them being hunter-gatherers. You can go over there. Look at what migrating means. Okay, so Kara, so you know what a hunter-gatherer does. So what does it mean to migrate?
To move from place to place.
It would be to move to place. So the Navajo actually began to migrate or move to the New Mexico by the late 1200s. So why do you think they were moving? Tristan? They were hunter-gatherers, so why do you think they were moving?
Find the food.
To find the food. So today, the Navajo are the largest Pueblo people in the Southwest. Many live in the Four Corners area where the states of Utah, Colorado, and Arizona and New Mexico meet. So learning from the Pueblo. So in order to survive, the Navajo knew that they had to adapt to their area. So they moved from parts of Canada and Alaska. So what kind of region is that? Everybody?
Cold.
It's very cold there. So if they're moving to New Mexico, how do you think they had to adapt? Talk with your partner about it.
Yeah,
Okay, so Rod, what was one thing you and your partner discussed about what the Navajo had to do to adapt from being in Alaska to New Mexico?
They have to find more water
They'll have to find more water for what?
for their crops because there's not
Okay. Tanner, what was another thing?
They'd have to build a shelter for shade.
For shade, and what kind of shelters might they have had when they were in Alaska?
Igloos and pit houses.
Uh-huh. Okay, so like the Pueblo, the Navajo used dry farming to grow crops in the dry land. They also wove cotton into clothing. Both the Navajo and the Pueblo are known for their fine silver and turquoise jewelries. Turquoise is a blue stone that is found only in the Southwest and in western South America. So now we're on page 35, and the Navajo living. So I thought this was really cool. The Navajo tradition hogans are a home for a spirit as well as a shelter. So what do you think it means that it's a home for a spirit? Maya? Do you think maybe it could be for a religious reason?
Yeah.
Okay. So according to the legend, Coyote taught the first people how to build a hogan. He used forked sticks for the frame as he learned from the beaver. So as you look at these different houses, they kind of do look like how a beaver would build a dam, doesn't it? So he used the forked sticks for the frame as he learned from the beaver people, and a forked stick hogan has 5 sides, and they represent the morning of the east, the sunset in the west, and the darkness of the north, and then jet and heat waves. So many of the hogans today, the Navajo live in their contemporary homes, and the contemporary home is just like the house that you live in. However, those who practice the religious traditions build a hogan beside their house for religious ceremonies. So hogans today might have 5 or 6 or 8 sides. So looking back on page 35, the Navajo lived in hogans, which are dome-shaped homes for one family. The hogans are made of log or stick frames and covered in sod or mud. They have a smoke hole in the roof. Why would we have a smoke hole in the roof? Sarah?
So, get smoke out.
Okay, why would they have smoke inside?
Because they have a fire to be born.
That's right. So that it would release the smoke from the fire. Traditional hogans have 6 or 8 sides that face the east to catch the first rays of dawn. So what I thought was really cool about this is the different shapes of the hogans actually represented if a male lived in it or a female. And then this one I think was one for like a family. And then there's also, so this would be a male and a female, and this is more of a traditional style hogan that they have today. So you can really see the different sides for, some of them have either 8 or 6 sides. And so the Navajo believed in the balance to the earth, and they called Bozo, or walking in beauty. To maintain Hozo, the Navajo sing songs and chants. One song is, all is beauty before me, all is beauty behind me, and all is beautiful above. All is beautiful around me. So now what I want you to do is I want everybody to get a piece of paper out. And what you're going to do is you're going to look at the objectives on the board and write a paragraph that explains how the Pueblo adapted to the desert and how the Navajo learned to live in their new environment. So think about the things that we talked about. So when I was creating my lesson to plan for anticipated behavior, I knew that several of my students were struggling to pay attention and follow along with the lessons. So the first thing I did was I created a PowerPoint, and by creating the PowerPoint, I gave the students a visual stimuli, and this would help to engage them and get them to follow along with the lesson. The other thing that I did was I prepared different questions to ask during the readings and to get them to be more engaged and follow along with where we were reading in the book. I also, during the lesson, I had planned to give cues to where we were throughout the lesson. So as I went through the lesson, I noticed that several students were struggling with paying attention, and that was when I would call on them to answer questions, and every single one of them could not answer the question, and so and or I would just move on and ask another student to answer the question. Something that I give the student the answer, then re-ask the question to the entire class and give that student a second chance to answer the question and hopefully get them back engaged into where we were with the lesson. What is great about this class is students already know what their expectations are because my cooperating teacher has high expectations for the students of paying attention, following along with the lesson, and really digging deep into what they are supposed to be learning. So I didn't really expect to have any disruptions during the presentation or anything like that. Something else that I could have done for behavior was to give more of a positive reinforcement with the students. When I would ask questions, I could have been more engaging by telling them, oh, that was a great answer, or different things to make them feel good about answering their question correctly. Some other things that I could have done to engage the students to get them to pay more attention during the lesson would have been to integrate either personal stories. So when I was talking about the Hogans, I could have integrated into the story of having the students think about how it would feel to be the Navajo and live in a one-bedroom house, and what it would be like, and have the students be more engaged into the lesson